Eliza just wanted rest after a chaotic wedding rehearsal. But when she knocks on the wrong hotel room, she meets a stranger whose world is nothing like hers, and everything begins to change. Before we get into the story, comment below wherein the world you're watching from today. Eliza Hart's feet were killing her. The new shoes she'd bought for her cousin's wedding had seemed like a good idea in the store, but after 6 hours of standing through the rehearsal dinner, she was ready to throw them out the window. At 42, she should have known better than to pick style over comfort. She dragged herself down the hotel hallway, the bridesmaid dress that was just a bit too tight bunching uncomfortably under her arms. The fancy Westbrook Hotel was way beyond her budget, but her cousin Tiffany had insisted all the wedding party stay here. "It'll be fun," Tiffany had said. What wasn't fun was spending her last savings on this trip when she'd been out of work. For 6 months, Eliza fumbled in her purse for the room key her cousin had given her. She was supposed to be sharing with another bridesmaid, but Tiffany had texted that the room number was 14B. All Eliza wanted was to collapse into bed and forget that she'd been left out of the head count at dinner. Her stomach growled as she found the key card. Just a few more steps, she whispered to herself, counting down the door numbers. 12B, 13B. There it was, 14B. She slid the key card into the door, but the light flashed red. Frustrated, she tried again with the same result. Finally, she knocked, figuring her roommate must be inside already. The door swung open, but instead of Jessica, the other bridesmaid, Eliza found herself staring at a man. He was about her age, maybe a few years older, with dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. He wore dress slacks and an unbuttoned white shirt that revealed a glimpse of his chest. His feet were bare, and his hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. "You're not room service," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly amused rather than annoyed. Eliza felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry. I thought this was my cousin's room. I didn't mean to bother." "You haven't," he said gently, leaning against the doorframe. "Actually, would you like to come in? I was just about to order dinner and I hate eating alone." Eliza blinked. Taken aback by the invitation, she glanced down at her wrinkled bridesmaid dress and felt suddenly very aware of how tired she must look. "That's very kind, but I should find my actual room," she said, backing away slightly. "Are you sure? The hotel restaurant closes in 10 minutes, and room service is the only option left." Her stomach chose that moment to growl loudly. The man smiled, and Eliza noticed the small crinkles around his eyes when he did. "I really couldn't impose," she tried again, though the thought of food was incredibly tempting. "I have truffle fries and strawberry shortcake on speed dial," he said with a slight smile. Eliza hesitated for just a second longer before her hunger and something else, curiosity maybe, won out. "Well, when you put it that way, I'm Eliza Hart," she said, extending her hand. "Christopher Dane," he replied, taking her hand briefly. His palm was warm against hers. "Please, come in." Christopher's room was much larger than what Eliza had expected, a suite with a sitting area near a large window overlooking the city lights. She stood awkwardly for a moment before he gestured to the small table by the window. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll call down for food. What would you like besides the truffle fries and shortcake?" "Honestly, that sounds perfect right now," Eliza said, sinking gratefully into one of the chairs and slipping off her painful shoes under the table. Christopher picked up the phone and ordered efficiently, adding a bottle of wine and 2 burgers to the fries and dessert. When he hung up, he poured water from a carafe into 2 glasses and brought one to Eliza. "So," he said, sitting across from her, "you're here for a wedding?" Eliza nodded, taking a sip of water. "My cousin Tiffany's getting married tomorrow. I'm a bridesmaid, hence the dress." She gestured at her outfit with a self-conscious laugh. "I was wondering about that," Christopher said with a smile. "Most people don't wander hotels in formal wear." "I don't usually dress like this," Eliza admitted. "Normally I'm in jeans and a sweater, but Tiffany wanted all the bridesmaids in purple, said it matched her theme." "It's a nice color on you," Christopher said, and something about his direct gaze made Eliza believe he meant it. "Thank you. What about you?" "Business trip?" Christopher nodded. "Design conference. I'm giving a talk tomorrow. Afternoon. You're a designer. What kind?" I run a design firm. We do everything from architecture to product design. The way he said it was simple, without showing off. But Eliza sensed there was more to it than he was letting on. A knock at the door announced the arrival of their food. Christopher let the server in, who wheeled a table covered in silver domes. Eliza's mouth watered at the smell as the covers were removed. Once they were alone again, Christopher moved the dishes to their table and poured wine into 2 glasses. 2 accidental meetings, he said, raising his glass. Eliza smiled and clinked, her glass against his. To people who don't mind when strangers knock on their door. The truffle fries were everything Eliza had hoped for, crispy, salty, with just the right amount of truffle oil. The burger was perfectly cooked, and for a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. "So, Eliza Hart," Christopher said eventually, "tell me about yourself when you're not wearing purple bridesmaid dresses." "Not much to tell lately," she admitted. "I lost my job 6 months ago. I was an event coordinator for a marketing company, but they downsized." "I'm sorry to hear that," Eliza shrugged. "It happens. I've been doing some freelance work, making handmade cards and selling them to shops in my neighborhood. It doesn't pay the bills, but it keeps me busy." "You make cards, like greeting cards?" Christopher looked genuinely interested. "Yes, I use pressed flowers, handmade paper, that sort of thing. I've always loved crafting, but it was just a hobby until recently." "That sounds like real art to me," Christopher said. "Do you have any photos?" Surprised by his interest, Eliza pulled out her phone and showed him a few pictures of her recent work. Christopher studied them carefully, asking questions about her techniques and materials. "These are beautiful," he said finally. "You have a real eye for composition." "Thank you," Eliza said, feeling warmed by his praise. "What about you? What got you into design?" A shadow crossed Christopher's face for a moment. "I started out designing furniture. My father was a carpenter, and I grew up in his workshop. After college, I began with small commissions, then gradually expanded. Now you run a whole firm?" "Dane Designs International," he said with a nod. "We've grown a lot in the last 10 years. Eliza almost choked on her wine. "Wait, Dane Designs? As in the company that redesigned the Thompson Museum last year?" "That was all over the news." Christopher smiled a bit sheepishly. "That's us." "Wow, I had no idea I was dining with design royalty." "Hardly royalty," he said with a dismissive wave. "Just a guy who likes to create things." They moved on to the strawberry shortcake as their conversation flowed easily from design to Eliza's cats. She had 3 in her small walk-up apartment, to Christopher's travel experiences. "So you live in New York?" he asked, refilling her wine glass. "Born and raised. I'm in a tiny place in the East Village. Rent-controlled, thankfully, or I'd have been priced out years ago. No elevator, but I don't mind the stairs most days. Except when carrying cat litter." Eliza laughed. "Exactly. 5 flights with 20 pounds of litter is my regular workout." "I have a place in Soho," Christopher said, "but I'm rarely there, always traveling for work. Don't you get lonely?" The question slipped out before Eliza could stop it. Christopher looked out at the city lights for a moment before answering. "Yes," he said simply. "I do." There was something vulnerable in his admission that made Eliza's heart ache a little. Here was this successful, apparently wealthy man eating room service with a stranger because he didn't want to be alone. "I was my sister's caretaker for 3 years before she passed," he said suddenly. "Cancer. After that, I threw myself into work, built the company, took on bigger projects. But sometimes I wonder what I'm building it all for." "I'm so sorry about your sister," Eliza said softly. Christopher nodded. "Kate was amazing. She's the reason I stopped designing the things that really brought me joy." "What do you mean?" "After she died, I focused on commercial success. The company grew, but somewhere along the way I started creating what would sell rather than what inspired me." He looked at Eliza with surprising intensity. "When was the last time you created a card just because you wanted to, not because it would sell?" "Last week," Eliza answered without hesitation. "I made one for my goddaughter. She's 6, and she thinks I hung the moon because I put glitter on her birthday card." Christopher smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "That's what I miss, creating something just to make one person happy." They fell into a comfortable silence as they finished their dessert, the city twinkling below them. Eliza glanced at her watch and was shocked to see it was past midnight. I should go, she said reluctantly. The wedding's at 11 and Tiffany will kill me if I have bags under my eyes in the photos. Of course, Christopher said, standing as she did. Let me walk you to your real room. Do you know the number? Eliza looked at the text from her cousin again. It says 41B, not 14B. I read it backward. No wonder the key didn't work. Christopher walked her to the elevator, and they rode up to the 4th floor in silence. As they reached 41B, Eliza turned to thank him. I had a really nice time tonight, she said honestly. Thank you for the dinner and the company. The pleasure was mine, Christopher replied. I haven't enjoyed a conversation that much in years. Eliza used her keycard, and this time the light flashed green. She pushed the door open slightly, then turned back to Christopher. Good luck with your talk tomorrow. Good luck with the wedding, he said. Good night, Eliza. Good night, Christopher. Inside the room, which was thankfully empty, Jessica must be staying elsewhere. Eliza slipped off her dress and washed her face. As she was about to get into bed, she noticed a piece of paper that had been slipped under the door. She picked it up and unfolded it. In a strong, clear handwriting was a simple message. If you ever knock by accident again, I'll always answer. See, Eliza clutched the note to her chest, a smile spreading across her face. Tomorrow was the wedding, and then she'd be heading back to New York to her cats and her job search and her small apartment. But tonight, something unexpected had happened. She'd connected with someone who seemed to see her, really see her, and that felt like the beginning of something important. She fell asleep with the note on her nightstand, wondering what the morning would bring. Eliza woke to a sharp knock at her door. She groaned and glanced at the bedside clock, 7:30 a.m. The wedding wasn't until 11, but Tiffany had insisted all bridesmaids be ready for hair and makeup by 8. Coming, she called, pulling on the hotel robe and shuffling to the door, but it wasn't Tiffany or one of the other bridesmaids. Instead, a hotel employee stood in the hallway with a room service cart. Ms. Hart, breakfast delivery, the young man said cheerfully. I didn't order breakfast, Eliza said, confused. The server smiled. It's been taken care of, Mum. He wheeled the cart into the room, lifted the silver covers to reveal a spread of fresh fruit, pastries, and 2 large coffees, then handed her a small envelope before leaving. Eliza opened the envelope and pulled out a card, a beautiful, simple design with a watercolor door on the front. Inside, in the same handwriting as last night's note, was written, Would you consider breakfast with a man who's still thinking about last night's shortcake and the woman who made it sweeter? Her heart fluttered as she read the words. Before she could decide what to do, there was another knock. This time, when she opened the door, Christopher stood there, freshly showered and dressed in jeans and a light blue button-up shirt that brought out the blue in his eyes. Good morning, he said. I hope I'm not too early. I just got your breakfast delivery, Eliza said, suddenly very aware that she was in her robe with morning hair and no makeup. I wasn't expecting... Give me 5 minutes? Christopher smiled. Take your time, I'll wait in the hall. Don't be silly, Eliza said, stepping aside. Come in, just ignore how I look. You look fine, Christopher said, then added with a grin, but I'll turn my back if it makes you feel better. While Christopher poured coffee, Eliza ducked into the bathroom, quickly brushed her teeth, splashed water on her face, and ran a comb through her hair. She changed into jeans and a sweater, then rejoined him at the table where he'd arranged the breakfast. This is a nice surprise, she said, accepting the coffee he handed her. I was hoping we might spend a little time together before your wedding duties begin, Christopher said. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation last night. Eliza smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Neither could I. I'd like to see you again, Eliza, Christopher said directly. After the wedding, back in New York, the straightforwardness of his statement caught her off guard. Men in her experience usually played games, not laid their cards on the table. I'd like that too, she admitted. But I should warn you, my life is kind of a mess right now. No job, 3 cats, and an apartment that could fit in that corner of this room. Christopher laughed. I've dated women who had personal assistants and vacation homes. Trust me, when I say I'd rather have coffee in your tiny apartment with your 3 cats than another dinner with someone who's only interested in what I do, not who I am. Eliza studied him over her coffee cup. You know, for a successful businessman, you're surprisingly real. "Thank you, I think," he replied with a smile. "When my sister was sick, it put a lot of things in perspective. Success doesn't mean much if you have no one to share it with." They enjoyed their breakfast, talking easily about their plans for the day. Christopher explained that his design talk was at 2, then he had a dinner with potential clients. "What time does the wedding end?" he asked. "The reception should be over by 6, but I've got an early train back to the city tomorrow morning. Would you consider changing your plans? My driver is taking me back to New York tomorrow. We could have dinner tonight and then I could give you a ride home tomorrow." Eliza hesitated. It was a tempting offer, but she barely knew this man. No matter how comfortable she felt with him. "I don't want to impose," she said. "You're not imposing if I'm inviting you," Christopher replied. "But I understand if it's too soon. No pressure." His consideration only made her like him more. "Let me think about it, okay? I'll let you know after the wedding." Fair enough. Christopher reached into his pocket and handed her a business card. "My cell number's on there. Text me either way." Eliza took the card and nearly gasped. The logo for Dane Designs International was familiar. She'd seen it in magazines and on buildings. Christopher wasn't just successful, he was famous in his field. "You really are a big deal, aren't you?" she asked, holding up the card. Christopher shrugged. "The company is. I'm just a guy who'd rather have breakfast with you than attend another business meeting." The sincerity in his voice made Eliza blush. Her phone chimed with a text, breaking the moment. "That's Tiffany," she said, checking the message. "I need to get to the bridal suite right away." "Go," Christopher said, standing up. "Good luck with the wedding." "Good luck with your talk," Eliza replied, tucking his card into her pocket. Impulse, she stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. "Thank you for breakfast." Christopher's eyes widened slightly and he smiled. "It was my pleasure." As soon as Eliza entered the bridal suite, she was swept into the chaos of pre-wedding activities. Tiffany was in full bride mode, alternating between tears and dictator-like commands. The other bridesmaids were busy with hair and makeup, and Eliza was immediately pulled into a chair to begin her transformation. "Where have you been?" Tiffany demanded. "I texted you an hour ago." "Sorry, I was having breakfast," Eliza said. Jessica, who was getting her hair curled nearby, raised an eyebrow. "Alone?" Eliza felt her face grow warm. "No, actually. I met someone." All activity in the room seemed to pause as 5 women turned to stare at her. "You what?" Tiffany asked, momentarily forgetting her bridal stress. "Who? When? Details now." "It's nothing, really." Eliza tried to downplay it. "I knocked on the wrong door last night, and the guy was nice about it. We had dinner, and then he brought breakfast this morning." "Is he cute?" asked one of the bridesmaids. "Is he single?" added another. "Yes and yes," Eliza admitted, "but it's probably just a vacation thing." Tiffany wasn't willing to let it go that easily. "Name, occupation, age, go." Eliza sighed. "Christopher Dane. He owns a design firm. Mid-40s. The makeup artist who had been quietly working on another bridesmaid suddenly looked up. "Wait, Christopher Dane of Dane Designs? The guy who was on the cover of Modern Design Titans last month?" Eliza blinked in surprise. "I guess so. He mentioned his company redesigned the Thompson Museum." "Oh my God," the makeup artist said, pulling out her phone and typing quickly. She held up the screen to show a professional photo of Christopher in a sleek suit, looking poised and serious, so different from the relaxed man who had shared truffle fries with her. "This guy?" Eliza nodded, feeling suddenly out of her depth. "That's him." The room erupted in excited chatter, with everyone talking over each other to ask questions. Tiffany clapped her hands to restore order. "Okay, enough. This is still my wedding day," she said, though she was smiling. "But Eliza, you're telling me everything at the reception." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of hairspray, makeup, and photos. The wedding itself was beautiful, despite Tiffany having a small meltdown when the flower girl refused to walk down the aisle. Eliza performed her bridesmaid duties perfectly, though her mind kept wandering to Christopher and their breakfast together. During a quiet moment at the reception, while the other guests were dancing, Eliza slipped outside to the hotel's garden terrace. She pulled out her phone and Christopher's business card. hesitating for a moment before sending a text. Wedding almost over. How was your talk? The reply came quickly. Went well. Current status. Stuck at dinner with clients who think beige is an exciting color choice. Eliza laughed out loud, typing back, sounds thrilling. Reception food surprisingly good, though I'm spending most of my time keeping my cousin from fighting with her new mother-in-law. Families, Christopher replied. Have you thought about tomorrow? My offer still stands. Eliza took a deep breath and typed, I'd like that ride back to NYC and dinner tonight if you're free after your client meeting. I'll make myself free. Meet me in the hotel bar at 9? See you then, Eliza replied, feeling a flutter of excitement. When she returned to the reception, Tiffany immediately cornered her. Okay, spill it, her cousin demanded. What's going on with you and Mr. Design magazine? Eliza shrugged, trying to appear casual. We're having dinner tonight, and he's giving me a ride back to New York tomorrow. Tiffany's eyes widened. Eliza, this is huge. It's just dinner, Eliza protested. Please, the man brought you breakfast. In all my dating years, no man has ever brought me breakfast unless I was already sleeping with him. Tiffany, Eliza felt her face flush. It's not like that, we just connected. Her cousin's expression softened. That's even better, sweetie. I haven't seen you this excited about anyone since that jerk Brad broke your heart 3 years ago. It's different with Christopher, Eliza said quietly. He's successful, yes, but that's not what draws me to him. He listens. He sees me. Then, go for it, Tiffany said, hugging her. Just promise you'll name your first child after me. You're impossible, Eliza laughed, hugging her back. The reception ended with Tiffany and her new husband leaving in a shower of rose petals. Eliza helped clean up, then rushed back to her room to change for dinner with Christopher. She didn't have many options, having packed light for the weekend, but she found a simple black dress that would have to do. At 5 minutes to 9, she entered the hotel bar, scanning the room nervously. Christopher wasn't there yet, so she took a seat at a small table near the window. Just as she was checking her watch, a man approached her table. Excuse me, he said. Are you Eliza Hart? He wasn't Christopher, but a well-dressed older man with silver hair and sharp eyes. Yes, she replied cautiously. Can I help you? My name is Victor Caldwell, he said, sitting down without being invited. I'm Christopher Dane's business partner. Eliza felt a chill run down her spine at his cold tone. Nice to meet you. I'm waiting for Christopher, actually. Yes, I know, Victor said. That's why I'm here. Christopher has been under a lot of pressure lately. The company is at a critical juncture with several major contracts pending. Okay, Eliza said slowly, not understanding why he was telling her this. Let me be direct, Ms. Hart. Christopher's reputation is crucial to our business. Our clients expect a certain image, a certain class of associates. The implication hit Eliza like a slap. And I don't fit that image. Victor gave a thin smile. I've taken the liberty of checking into your background, unemployed, living in a walk-up apartment with 3 cats, making greeting cards. He made her life sound pathetic, and Eliza felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. With all due respect, Mr. Caldwell, my relationship with Christopher is none of your business. Everything Christopher does is my business, Victor said sharply. We've worked too hard to build Dane Designs to have it compromised by a distraction. Eliza stood up, her hands shaking. I think we're done here. Victor reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, placing it on the table. $10,000. Take it, go back to New York tomorrow on your own, and forget you ever met Christopher Dane. Eliza stared at the envelope in disbelief. You're trying to pay me off. Are you serious? Completely, Victor said, standing as well. Consider it a generous severance package for a very brief acquaintance. You can keep your money, Eliza said, her voice tight with anger. And you can tell Christopher I won't be joining him for dinner or the ride home. She turned to leave, almost running into Christopher, who was approaching the table, a confused expression on his face. Eliza? Victor? What's going on? Victor smoothly slid the envelope into his pocket. Just introducing myself to your friend. Unfortunately, she was just leaving. Eliza couldn't bear to look at Christopher, humiliation burning through her. Your partner made it very clear that I'm not the right kind of person to be associated with Dane Designs. Good night, Christopher. She pushed past him, ignoring his call of, "Eliza, wait!" and hurried toward the elevator, tears stinging her eyes. She jabbed the button repeatedly, desperate to escape. Christopher caught up to her just as the doors opened. "Eliza, please. Whatever Victor said, he offered me money to leave you alone," she said, stepping into the elevator. $10,000 to go away. Is that what I'm worth to you, Christopher? A business expense? What? No. I had no idea. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his reply. Eliza leaned against the wall, her hands covering her face as the tears came. How could she have been so stupid? A man like Christopher Dane lived in a different world, a world where people like her could be paid to disappear when inconvenient. Back in her room, Eliza threw her few belongings into her suitcase. She'd find a train tonight, even if it meant sitting in the station until morning. Anything to get away from this humiliation. Her phone rang. Christopher calling. She sent it to voicemail. Then he texted, "Eliza, please let me explain. I had no idea what Victor was planning. I would never disrespect you like that." Another text followed. "Victor doesn't speak for me. What he did was unforgivable." And another, "Please, just 5 minutes. In person. I'm outside your door." Eliza stared at the messages, tears blurring her vision. Then came a gentle knock, the same kind of knock that had started this whole mess just 24 hours ago. She stood frozen, unsure whether to open the door or pretend she wasn't there. Her heart and head were at war, one urging her to listen, the other warning her to protect herself. The knock came again, followed by Christopher's voice. "Eliza, please, I'm not leaving until we talk." Taking a deep breath, Eliza approached the door, still uncertain what she would do when she opened it. Eliza's hand hovered over the doorknob. Every instinct told her to ignore Christopher's knocking, to protect herself from further humiliation. But something else, something stronger, made her unlock the door. Christopher stood in the hallway, his expression a mix of worry and determination. His normally perfect hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. "5 minutes," Eliza said, her voice barely steady. "That's all." "Thank you," Christopher said, stepping inside but keeping his distance. "Eliza, I swear to you, I had no idea what Victor was planning. What he did was completely out of line. He offered me money, Christopher, like I was some problem that needed to be handled." The humiliation still burned fresh in her mind. Christopher's face darkened with anger. "I know. I confronted him after you left. He claimed he was protecting the company, protecting me." He shook his head in disgust. "I told him that's not who we are, that's not who I am, isn't it?" Eliza asked, crossing her arms. "You live in a world where people like me can just be paid off, made to disappear when inconvenient." "That's not my world," Christopher insisted. "Yes, I have money. Yes, my company has a certain image. But none of that matters compared to how I felt having dinner with you last night or breakfast this morning." He took a cautious step toward her. "Victor has been pushing me for years to be someone I'm not. The perfect businessman, the face of the brand. I went along with it after Kate died because it was easier than feeling anything. But then you knocked on my door, and for the first time in years, I felt real." The sincerity in his voice made Eliza's defenses waver. "I don't belong in your world, Christopher." "Then maybe it's not my world either," he said quietly. "Do you know what I was doing right before you knocked on my door last night? I was sketching a chair design. Not for a client, not for the company, just for me. First time I've done that. In 3 years. What are you saying?" "I'm saying you reminded me of who I used to be, before the magazine covers and the corporate clients, when I designed things because I loved creating, not because they would sell." He ran a hand through his hair. "Victor doesn't understand that. He only sees the business, the contracts, the brand." Eliza felt her resolve weakening. "I don't want to cause problems for you. You're not the problem, Eliza. The problem is that I've been living someone else's idea of my life for too long." Christopher took another step closer. "My 5 minutes are almost up. I'll go if you want me to. But I'm hoping you'll give us another chance. Eliza looked at him for a long moment. There was something so genuine in his eyes, so different from the polished businessman in the magazine photos. This was the man who'd shared truffle fries and talked about his sister, who'd ordered breakfast just to see her again. I changed my train ticket, she said finally. I'm leaving tomorrow morning at 8. Christopher's face fell slightly. I understand. No, I mean, if your offer of a ride is still open, I'd rather go with you. But Victor works for me, not the other way around, Christopher said firmly. And after tonight, he's on thin ice. What he did was inexcusable. Eliza took a deep breath. Okay. Christopher's expression brightened cautiously. I'll go with you tomorrow, Eliza clarified. As for tonight, I think I need some time to myself. Of course, Christopher said, relief evident in his voice. I'll pick you up here at 9 tomorrow morning, and Eliza, he hesitated, then reached for her hand. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain. After Christopher left, Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, emotions swirling. Part of her still couldn't believe someone like Victor had tried to pay her off. The other part couldn't believe someone like Christopher had stood up for her. Her phone pinged with a text from Tiffany. Everything okay? You disappeared from the reception early. Eliza replied, long story, tell you tomorrow. That night, Eliza barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the day. By morning, she had made up her mind. Whatever was happening with Christopher, she wouldn't let Victor Caldwell's snobbery chase her away. If Christopher thought she was worth fighting for, maybe she was. At 9 sharp, there was a gentle knock at her door. Eliza opened it to find Christopher waiting, dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater. Good morning, he said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Ready to go? Almost, Eliza replied, gesturing for him to come in while she finished packing. Christopher entered but remained standing awkwardly near the door. I meant what I said last night, Eliza. Victor was completely out of line. I believe you, Eliza said, zipping her small suitcase closed. I thought about it all night, and I decided I'm not going to let someone like him tell me where I belong. Relief washed over Christopher's face. I'm glad to hear that. But, Eliza added, looking him in the eye, I need to be clear about something. I am who I am, Christopher. Unemployed card maker with 3 cats and a tiny apartment. If that's going to be a problem for your company's image, it won't be, Christopher interrupted. And even if it were, I wouldn't care. He took a step toward her. Do you know what I did this morning? I called an emergency board meeting for Monday. I'm restructuring the company leadership. Victor's being moved to a position where he'll have no say in my personal life. Eliza's eyes widened. Because of what happened last night? Partly, Christopher admitted, but it's been coming for a long time. Victor's vision for the company has been moving further and further from mine. Last night was just the final straw. I don't want to be the reason you make big business decisions, Eliza said, concerned. You're not. You're the reason I finally saw clearly what I've been unhappy about for years. Christopher smiled. Ready to go home. The ride to New York in Christopher's sleek black SUV was surprisingly comfortable. The driver, a friendly older man named Frank, greeted Eliza warmly, and Christopher had brought coffee and pastries for the journey. As they left the hotel behind, Eliza felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Whatever happened next, she had stood up for herself, and that felt good. Tell me more about your cards, Christopher said as they settled in for the drive. How did you get started making them? My grandmother taught me, Eliza explained, warming to the subject. She made all her own greeting cards using pressed flowers from her garden. After she passed away, I kept up the tradition. It was just a hobby until I lost my job. Do you sell them online? Eliza shook her head. Just to a few local shops in my neighborhood. I don't really have the technical know-how for e-commerce. Christopher nodded thoughtfully. I have some friends in the sustainable design space who might be interested in your work. If you'd be open to it, I could introduce you. I'd like that, Eliza said, touched by his offer, but I don't want you to feel obligated to help me. It's not obligation, Christopher assured her. Your cards are beautiful. They deserve a wider audience. The conversation flowed easily as they drove, covering everything from Christopher's favorite buildings in New York to Eliza's dream of someday owning a small storefront for her crafts. By the time they reached the city, Eliza felt as if she'd known Christopher for years, not just days. "Where should Frank drop you?" Christopher asked as they entered Manhattan. "East Village," Eliza said, giving her address. "But you don't have to come all the way there. I can take a taxi from your place." "I'd like to see where you live," Christopher said, "if that's okay with you." An hour later, Frank pulled up in front of Eliza's apartment building. It was a typical East Village walk-up, the brick facade showing its age, a far cry from the sleek high-rises of Soho where Christopher lived. "5 flights up," Eliza warned as Christopher insisted on carrying her suitcase. "I could use the exercise," he joked. By the 3rd floor, Eliza was slightly winded, but Christopher showed no signs of fatigue. At the 5th floor, she unlocked her apartment door, feeling suddenly nervous about showing him her small space. "Welcome to my palace," she said, with a self-deprecating smile. The apartment was tiny but neat, with large windows that let in plenty of light. Every surface was carefully organized to maximize the limited space. Plants lined the windowsills, and the walls were covered with framed illustrations and small paintings. A tabby cat came to investigate the visitors, while 2 others watched, suspiciously from the couch. "This is Max," Eliza said as the tabby rubbed against Christopher's legs. "And those 2 on the couch are Luna and Charlie. They're a bit more standoffish with strangers." "Hello, Max," Christopher said, bending down to pet the cat. "It's nice to meet you." "Let me give you the grand tour," Eliza said. "It'll take about 30 seconds. The tour consisted of the small living room that flowed into an even smaller kitchen, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and a bedroom just large enough for a double bed and a dresser. "It's not much," Eliza said, suddenly conscious of how it must look to someone used to luxury. "It's perfect," Christopher said, surprising her. "It feels like a home, like you." "You're just being nice," Eliza laughed. "I'm being honest," Christopher insisted. "My place in Soho is 3 times this size, but it doesn't have half the personality. I've never even hung anything on the walls." "Why not?" Christopher shrugged. "Never found anything that felt right. Or maybe I just never bothered to look." He walked over to examine her crafting table in the corner of the living room, where papers, ribbons, and dried flowers were neatly organized. "Is this where you make your cards?" "Yes, this is my studio," Eliza said, making air quotes. Christopher picked up one of her finished cards, a sympathy card with delicate pressed forget-me-nots and handwritten calligraphy. "These really are beautiful, Eliza. You have a gift." His peep's genuine admiration touched her deeply. "Thank you." "Can I take you to dinner tonight?" Christopher asked, setting the card down gently. "I'd like that," Eliza said. "But nowhere fancy, please. I don't own anything appropriate for your usual restaurants." "How about I cook for you instead?" Christopher suggested. "At my place, I make a decent pasta, and it would give you a chance to see where I live. You cook?" Eliza couldn't hide her surprise. "Don't sound so shocked," Christopher laughed. "I lived alone for years before I could afford a personal chef. I'd love to." "Try your pasta," Eliza said. "Should I bring wine?" "Just yourself," Christopher replied, his eyes warm. "I'll take care of everything else." After Christopher left, promising to send a car for her at 7, Eliza collapsed onto her couch, immediately surrounded by her cats. "What am I doing?" she asked them. "Getting involved with someone like him is asking for trouble," Max purred. In response, while Luna only blinked her green eyes slowly. "You're right," Eliza said to the cats. "I should at least give it a chance." At precisely 7, the doorbell rang. Eliza had spent the afternoon cleaning her apartment and choosing what to wear, settling on a simple black dress with a cardigan, the nicest outfit she owned. She expected Frank with the car, but when she opened the door, Christopher stood there, a small bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "I thought I'd pick you up myself," he said, handing her the flowers. "These reminded me of your cards." "They're beautiful," Eliza said, genuinely touched. "Come in while I put them in water." "I see your bodyguards are still on duty," Christopher noted as Max immediately approached for attention while the other cats watched from a distance. "They take their job very seriously," Eliza said, finding a small vase for the flowers. When they arrived at Christopher's building in Soho, Eliza tried not to gape at the sleek modern high-rise. A doorman greeted Christopher by name and nodded politely to Eliza. Christopher's apartment was on the top floor, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. The furniture was minimal and obviously expensive. But Christopher had been right. The place lacked personality. No photographs, no art on the walls, nothing that revealed who lived there. "What do you think?" Christopher asked as he led her into the spacious living room. "It's beautiful," Eliza said diplomatically. "Those views are incredible. But it doesn't feel like you," she admitted. "At least, not the you I've gotten to know." Christopher smiled. "I knew you'd say that, and you're right." He guided her to the kitchen, where ingredients were already laid out on the counter. "This is the only room I really use aside from the bedroom." The kitchen was indeed more lived in than the rest of the apartment, with professional-grade appliances and copper pots hanging from a rack. "Cooking is my therapy," Christopher explained, handing Eliza a glass of wine. "It's the one creative thing I still do regularly." "I'm impressed," Eliza said, sipping the wine. "Need any help?" "You can keep me company," Christopher said, rolling up his sleeves and getting to work on the pasta dough. As he cooked, Christopher told Eliza more about his sister Kate, how she'd loved to cook, and how they'd spent countless hours in the kitchen together during her illness. "After she died, cooking was the only thing that made me feel close to her," he explained, his hands working the dough with practiced ease. "She sounds wonderful," Eliza said. "She would have liked you," Christopher said, looking up from his work. "She always said I needed someone real in my life, someone who would call me on my nonsense." Eliza raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a lot of nonsense that needs calling out?" "According to Kate, yes," Christopher laughed. "She thought I was too serious, too focused on work. She was right." "Well, I'm pretty good at calling out nonsense," Eliza said with a smile. "It's one of my specialties." Dinner was delicious. Homemade fettuccine with a simple but perfect sauce of butter, herbs, and parmesan. They ate at a small table in the kitchen, rather than the formal dining room, talking easily as they had since the night Eliza knocked on the wrong door. After dinner, Christopher gave Eliza a proper tour of the apartment, including his home office. Unlike the rest of the space, this room felt personal, with bookshelves full of design books and a large drafting table covered with sketches. "This is where I hide from the world," Christopher admitted. "Where I can still design for myself, not for clients or the company image." Eliza examined some of the sketches, furniture designs mostly, with a few architectural drawings. "These are beautiful," she said. "Why don't you produce them?" "Victor doesn't think they fit the Dane Designs brand," Christopher said, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "Too simple, not luxurious enough." "That's ridiculous," Eliza said. "They're elegant and practical. People would love these." "Maybe," Christopher said thoughtfully. "After the restructuring, I might have more freedom to pursue my own design direction." As the evening went on, they moved to the living room where Christopher surprised Eliza by pulling out a record player and a collection of vinyl albums. "Another hidden passion?" she asked. "My father collected records," Christopher explained, selecting one and setting the needle down carefully. The warm sounds of jazz filled the room. "When he died, I inherited his collection. It's one of the few things I brought with me from my old life." They sat together on the sofa, talking as the music played softly in the background. Without thinking, Eliza rested her head on Christopher's shoulder, comfortable in a way she hadn't felt with someone in years. "This is nice," she said quietly. "Yes, it is," Christopher agreed, putting his arm around her. "Eliza, and I know we've only known each other for a couple of days, but I feel like—" The shrill ring of a phone interrupted him. Christopher sighed, checking his cell phone. "It's Victor. I should take this. I'm sorry." Eliza nodded, moving away slightly as Christopher answered the call. His expression quickly changed from relaxed to serious. "When?" he asked, standing up and walking a few steps away. "How bad?" "No, I understand. I'll be there first thing tomorrow." When he hung up, his face was grim. "I'm sorry, but I have to cut our evening short. There's a crisis with one of our major projects in Chicago, a structural issue that needs immediate attention." "Of course," Eliza said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Work comes first." "It's not that simple," Christopher said, running a hand through his hair. "People could get hurt if this isn't addressed properly. I need to fly to Chicago tonight." Tonight? Eliza couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. The company jet is being prepared now, Christopher said. Victor has already booked the engineering team. We'll be working around the clock to fix this. I understand, Eliza said, standing up. You should go. People's safety is important. Christopher took her hands in his. I'll call you as soon as I'm back. It shouldn't be more than a couple of days. Don't worry about me, Eliza said. Do what you need to do. Christopher kissed her then, a gentle, brief kiss that left Eliza wanting more. I'll have Frank take you home, he said, his voice low. And Eliza? Thank you for understanding. As Frank drove her back to the East Village, Eliza tried to sort through her feelings. The evening had been perfect until that phone call. But of course, Christopher had responsibilities, big ones. That was part of who he was. He's a good man, Ms. Hart, Frank said, breaking the silence. I've worked for Mr. Dane for 8 years, and I've never known him to put himself before others. I believe that, Eliza said. I just hope this isn't a pattern. With his work. Can't say it isn't, Frank admitted. But I haven't seen him like this, with a woman, I mean, in all the time I've known him. Whatever's happening between you, too, it's changed him. Frank's words stayed with Eliza as she climbed the 5 flights to her apartment. Maybe things with Christopher would work out. Maybe they wouldn't. But she wouldn't let fear stop her from finding out. The next morning, Eliza was sorting through job listings when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello, Ms. Hart? This is Sophia Jenkins from Dane Designs International. I'm Mr. Caldwell's assistant. Eliza's stomach tightened. Yes? Mr. Caldwell would like to meet with you this afternoon if you're available. Why? Eliza asked, immediately suspicious. He didn't share the reason with me, Sophia replied. But he asked me to tell you it's a professional matter, not personal. I'm not interested in meeting with Mr. Caldwell, Eliza said firmly. He said you might say that, Sophia said, her voice becoming less formal. Look, between us, Mr. Caldwell has been in meetings all morning with the board of directors. Something big is happening at the company, and I think it involves you somehow. Eliza hesitated. What could Victor possibly want? And why would the board be involved? Mr. Caldwell also asked me to tell you that Mr. Dane authorized this meeting before he left for Chicago, Sophia added. That detail changed things. If Christopher knew about this meeting, maybe it was legitimate. What time and where? Eliza asked finally. 3 o'clock at the Dane Designs headquarters in Midtown. I can send a car for you if you'd like. No, thank you. I'll make my own way there, Eliza said. She didn't want to be any more beholden to Dane Designs than necessary. After hanging up, Eliza immediately tried calling Christopher, but the call went straight to voicemail. She left a message asking him to call her back about the meeting with Victor, then set about getting ready. At precisely 2:45, Eliza walked into the sleek, modern lobby of Dane Designs International. The receptionist directed her to the executive floor, where Sophia, a polished young woman with a friendly smile, greeted her. Ms. Hart, thank you for coming. Mr. Caldwell is waiting for you in the conference room. Eliza followed Sophia through a maze of glass-walled offices. Employees glanced at her curiously as she passed, making her increasingly uncomfortable. What was she doing here? Sophia opened a door to reveal a large conference room with a stunning view of the city. Victor Caldwell stood at the window, his back to the door. Ms. Hart is here, Mr. Caldwell, Sophia announced. Victor turned, his expression unreadable. Thank you, Sophia. Please hold all my calls. When they were alone, Victor gestured to a chair. Please sit down. I'd rather stand, Eliza said coolly. What is this about, Mr. Caldwell? It's about Christopher, Victor said, his tone surprisingly less hostile than their previous meeting. And the future of this company. I don't see how either of those things concern me, Eliza replied. They concern you because Christopher has made them concern you, Victor said, finally taking a seat himself. He called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's planning to announce a major restructuring of the company leadership. He mentioned that, Eliza acknowledged cautiously. Did he also mention that he's planning to launch a new division of Dane Designs? One focused on sustainable, affordable design rather than luxury? Eliza's surprise must have shown on her face, so because Victor nodded knowingly. I thought not. Christopher's been working on this plan for months apparently, but he's accelerated the timeline. He sent the board a detailed proposal from the plane last night, along with his new designs. That still doesn't explain why I'm here, Eliza said. Victor opened a folder on the table and slid it toward her. Because of this, Eliza reluctantly picked up the folder and opened it. Inside were printouts of her card designs, along with sketches of what appeared to be a retail space. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "Christopher wants to partner with you," Victor said. "He's proposing a line of eco-friendly greeting cards and stationery as part of the new division. Your designs, his production and distribution network." Eliza sat down heavily, stunned. "He never mentioned any of this to me." "I suspect he was waiting for the right moment," Victor said. "The point is, Ms. Hart, you are no longer just Christopher's friend. You're potentially a business partner, a part of Dane Designs." "I don't understand," Eliza said, her mind racing. "Yesterday you tried to pay me to leave Christopher alone, and today you're telling me I might be working with the company." "Yesterday I made a terrible mistake," Victor admitted, surprising Eliza even further. "I acted without Christopher's knowledge or approval, and I've already submitted my formal apology to both of you." Victor leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Ms. Hart, I've worked with Christopher for 15 years. I've seen him build this company from nothing into what it is today. But in the process, he lost something of himself, his passion, his vision." "And you think I helped him find it again?" Eliza said skeptically. "I know you did," Victor replied. "The designs he sent last night are the best work he's done in years, and his proposal for the new division is brilliant, exactly what the company needs to expand our market reach. So now you approve of me," Eliza said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Now I see what Christopher saw," Victor corrected. "Someone with talent and integrity, someone who could be an asset to this company in more ways than one." Eliza stood up, handing the folder back to Victor. "I appreciate the information, Mr. Caldwell, but I think I should discuss this with Christopher directly." "Of course," Victor agreed, standing as well. "But there's one more thing you should know." He hesitated, then continued, "The structural issue in Chicago? It's not as serious as Christopher was led to believe." "What do you mean?" "I mean that certain board members who are resistant to Christopher's new direction may have exaggerated the situation to get him out of New York before the board meeting." "Are you saying he was deliberately sent away?" Eliza asked, anger rising. "I'm saying that corporate politics can be complicated," Victor replied carefully. "Christopher is expected back tomorrow morning, just in time for the board meeting. But if his flight is delayed for any reason," Eliza understood the implication, "they could hold the meeting without him." "Exactly. Why are you telling me this?" Eliza asked suspiciously. "Whose side are you on, Mr. Caldwell?" "I'm on the side of this company," Victor said firmly. "And after seeing Christopher's proposal, I believe his vision for Dane Designs is the right one." He handed Eliza a business card. "My private number. If you hear from Christopher, please let me know." Eliza took the card, her mind swirling with questions and doubts. As she left the Dane Designs building, she tried calling Christopher again, but still got his voicemail. "Christopher, it's Eliza. Please call me as soon as you get this. I just met with Victor and there's a lot we need to talk about." Back in her apartment, Eliza paced nervously, her cats watching with curious eyes. Was Victor telling the truth? Had Christopher really included her in his business plans without telling her? And most worryingly, was someone deliberately trying to keep Christopher from the board meeting? As the evening wore on, with no word from Christopher, Eliza made a decision. If Christopher couldn't get back for the board meeting, maybe she could help ensure his vision was still heard. She picked up her phone and dialed Victor's number. "Mr. Caldwell, it's Eliza Hart. I think I know how we can make sure Christopher's proposal gets a fair hearing tomorrow." The morning of the board meeting dawned clear and bright. Eliza had barely slept, her mind racing with plans and worries. She'd spent half the night at her crafting table, working furiously to prepare for what she was about to do. Still unable to reach Christopher, she'd made a bold decision. If the board was determined to undermine his vision for the company, she would make sure they saw exactly what they would be rejecting. At 8:30 a.m., Eliza walked into the Dane Designs headquarters for the second time in 2 days. This time, however, she carried a large portfolio case filled with her work, Cards, designs, and prototypes she had stayed up all night creating. Victor met her in the lobby, his usual polished appearance showing signs of strain. "Any word from Christopher?" he asked quietly as they walked toward the elevator. "Nothing," Eliza said, worry evident in her voice. "His flight should have landed an hour ago." "The board meeting starts at 9, Victor said grimly. "We'll proceed with the plan. Regardless, are you ready?" Eliza took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The boardroom was already filling with people when they arrived, men and women in expensive suits, all wearing expressions of mild curiosity as Eliza entered with Victor. She recognized a few faces from business magazines and news reports about Dane Designs, Mr. Caldwell, one older man said, eyeing Eliza suspiciously. "I wasn't aware we were having guests at this meeting." "Miss Hart is here at my invitation, Mr. Reynolds," Victor replied smoothly. "As you know, she's a key part of Christopher's proposal for the new division." Mr. Reynolds frowned but said nothing more as everyone took their seats. Eliza felt painfully out of place in her simple dress among the power suits, but she kept her head high. At precisely 9 o'clock, an elegant woman at the head of the table called the meeting to order. "As Christopher Dane is still in Chicago, dealing with the structural issues, I'll be chairing today's meeting. First item on the agenda is the proposed company restructuring and new division launch. Perhaps we should table this discussion until Christopher returns," Victor suggested. Since it's his proposal, we all received the documentation," Mr. Reynolds interrupted. "I see no reason to delay. In fact, given the radical nature of these changes, perhaps it's better to discuss them objectively without Christopher's emotional investment clouding the issues." Several board members nodded in agreement, exactly as Victor had predicted they would. "Very well," the chairwoman said. "Let's discuss the proposal. Mr. Reynolds, you've expressed some concerns." Reynolds leaned forward. "This isn't the direction Dane Designs should be taking. Our brand is built on luxury and exclusivity. This new accessible design division would dilute everything we've built." "Not to mention the greeting card component," added another board member with obvious disdain. "We're a design firm, not a stationery store." Eliza felt a flush of anger rise in her cheeks, but kept silent, waiting for her moment. Victor cleared his throat. "If I may, Madam Chairwoman, I think the board is failing to see the vision here. The sustainable design market is growing exponentially. By expanding our reach, we're not diluting the brand, we're evolving it." "Fine words, Victor," Reynolds said dismissively. "But the numbers don't support this move. The initial investment would be substantial and the return uncertain. Why risk our established success on an unproven concept?" "Because sometimes staying the same is the biggest risk of all," said a new voice from the doorway. Every head turned to see Christopher standing there, looking tired but determined in a slightly rumpled suit. Eliza's heart leapt at the sight of him. "Christopher," the chairwoman said, clearly surprised. "We weren't expecting you back in time." "Clearly," Christopher replied dryly, walking into the room. His eyes found Eliza, and a small smile touched his lips before he turned back to the board. "I received some information that my presence here might be more urgent than the situation in Chicago." He cast a knowing glance at Victor, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Since I'm here, I'd like to present my proposal personally," Christopher continued, taking a position at the front of the room. "But first, I'd like to introduce someone. This is Eliza Hart, an independent artist whose work inspired much of what I'm proposing today." All eyes turned to Eliza, who straightened in her chair. "Miss Hart, would you mind joining me?" Christopher asked, extending his hand toward her. Eliza stood and walked to the front of the room, bringing her portfolio with her. Christopher squeezed her hand briefly as she joined him, the small gesture giving her courage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Christopher began, "for 15 years, Dane Designs has been synonymous with luxury. We've created beautiful spaces and objects for those who can afford the very best, and that won't change." He paused, looking around the room. "But the world is changing. Today's consumers care about sustainability, accessibility, and meaning. They want products that tell a story and reflect their values. By expanding our brand to include these priorities, we're not abandoning our core, we're growing it." Reynolds snorted. "Pretty speech, Christopher. But again, where are the numbers to support this?" Right here, Christopher said, pulling out a folder. Market research shows sustainable design growing at twice the rate of traditional luxury design. Millennials and Gen Z consumers are willing to pay premium prices for eco-friendly products, even in a challenging economy. He handed out copies of his research to each board member. But beyond the numbers, this is about the heart and soul of Dane Designs. My sister Kate always said our company should create beauty that makes a difference in the world. This new division honors that vision. Eliza watched the faces around the table. Some seemed moved by Christopher's words, others remained skeptical. "And the greeting card component?" one board member asked. "How does that fit into your vision?" Christopher turned to Eliza. "This is where Ms. Hart comes in. Eliza, would you share your work with the board?" With slightly trembling hands, Eliza opened her portfolio. "What I create isn't just greeting cards," she began, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "It's handcrafted sustainable art that helps people connect with each other in a digital world." She passed around samples of her work, cards made with recycled paper, pressed flowers and natural inks. Every piece is created with materials that would otherwise be discarded. The flowers are grown in community gardens. The paper is handmade from recycled fibers. To her surprise, the board members examined her work with genuine interest. Even Reynolds seemed impressed by the quality of the craftsmanship. "Last night I created these prototypes," Eliza continued, bringing out a series of cards with small furniture designs integrated into the artwork. Imagine sending a card that becomes a small piece of art or contains seeds that can be planted. Imagine stationery that tells the story of Dane Design's commitment to beauty and sustainability. Christopher stepped forward again. "What we're proposing is a complete ecosystem of design. From the buildings we create down to the cards that might sit on a desk within those buildings. A consistent vision of beauty, sustainability, and accessibility." The room was silent for a moment as the board digested this information. "It's certainly an innovative approach," the chairwoman said finally, "but the investment required is significant." "I'm prepared to fund the initial phase personally," Christopher said, surprising everyone, including Eliza. "That's how much I believe in this vision." "And what about Ms. Hart's role in all this?" Reynolds asked, eyeing Eliza skeptically. "I'm proposing that Eliza head the new stationery division," Christopher said. "Her artistic vision and commitment to sustainability are exactly what we need." Eliza tried to hide her shock. They had never discussed this, and the offer caught her completely off guard. The board discussion continued for another hour, with questions about finances, marketing strategy, and implementation timelines. Through it all, Christopher remained confident and passionate, with Eliza contributing her perspective on sustainable materials and artisanal processes. Finally, the chairwoman called for a vote. All in favor of approving the restructuring and new division as proposed by Christopher Dane. One by one, hands went up around the table. Even Reynolds reluctantly raised his hand, though he added, "with quarterly reviews of performance metrics." "The motion passes unanimously," the chairwoman announced. "Congratulations, Christopher, and welcome to Dane Designs, Ms. Hart." As the meeting adjourned, board members came up to examine Eliza's work more closely and introduce themselves. Several expressed genuine enthusiasm for the new direction. Victor approached them with a relieved smile. "Well done, both of you. I admit I had my doubts, but seeing the full vision presented like that, it's compelling." "Thank you for your support, Victor," Christopher said sincerely. "I know we've had our differences, but your expertise will be crucial for making this work." "I look forward to it," Victor replied, then added to Eliza, "And I hope you'll accept my apology for our first meeting, Ms. Hart. I was protecting the company the wrong way." "Water under the bridge," Eliza said, still feeling slightly dazed by everything that had happened. When they were finally alone in Christopher's office, Eliza turned to him with wide eyes. "Head of the stationery division? Christopher, we never discussed any of this." "I know," he admitted, loosening his tie. "It wasn't my original plan. But seeing you last night with Victor, hearing how you were willing to stand up for my vision even when I wasn't here, I knew you were the right person for this, but I don't have any business experience," Eliza protested. "I make cards at my kitchen table." And they're beautiful, Christopher said, taking her hands in his. The business side can be learned. The vision and heart you bring, that can't be taught. Eliza shook her head, still struggling to process everything. How did you even get back in time? Victor said your flight might be delayed. It was, Christopher confirmed. But after I got your message about meeting with Victor, I chartered a private plane, cost a fortune, but it was worth it to be here today. You did that because of my message? I did that because I realized something on that flight to Chicago, Christopher said, his expression suddenly serious. I realized that when I met you, when you knocked on my door by accident, something changed for me. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. You helped me remember what matters. Eliza felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. I still can't believe all this is happening. Yesterday I was unemployed, and today I'm apparently a division head at a major design firm. You can say no, Christopher said quickly. The job offer is completely separate from us, from whatever is happening between us. And what is happening between us? Eliza asked softly. Christopher stepped closer, his hands moving to gently cup her face. I'm falling in love with you, Eliza Hart. Maybe that sounds crazy after just a few days, but it's true. You walked into my life by accident, but now I can't imagine it without you. Eliza's heart swelled at his words. It doesn't sound crazy, she whispered, because I feel the same way. When Christopher kissed her, it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary, a partnership in business, in creativity, in life. 6 months later, Eliza stood in the doorway of a beautiful storefront in Soho, hardly believing it was real. The sign above the door read, Hart and Dane, Sustainable Design, in elegant lettering. Inside, the space was warm and inviting, part gallery, part workshop, part retail store. Christopher's furniture designs were displayed alongside Eliza's stationery and paper art. The back wall featured a large photograph of a door marked 14B, their private joke and the story they loved to tell. Ready for the grand opening? Christopher asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. As ready as I'll ever be, Eliza replied, leaning back against him. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of activity. The new division of Dane Designs had launched to enthusiastic press coverage, with Eliza's sustainable stationery receiving particular attention. Christopher had restructured the company as planned, with Victor now heading the traditional luxury division, while Christopher focused on the sustainable design initiative with Eliza. Their personal relationship had deepened, alongside their professional one. Christopher spent more nights at Eliza's small apartment than at his Soho loft, despite the 5-flight climb and the 3 cats who had claimed him as their own. They were talking about finding a new place together, something that combined the character of her apartment with the space of his loft. Have I told you today how proud I am of you? Christopher murmured against her ear. Only 3 times, Eliza laughed, but I never get tired of hearing it. The store was set to open in an hour, with press and VIP customers invited for a private preview. Eliza had insisted on inviting her old neighborhood shopkeepers who had first sold her cards, as well as the community gardeners who supplied her flowers. There's something I want to show you before everyone arrives, Christopher said, taking her hand and leading her to the center of the store. There, on a pedestal covered with a velvet cloth, was something Eliza hadn't seen before. What's this? She asked as Christopher gestured for her to remove the cloth. Underneath was a stunning sculpture, a perfectly crafted miniature door, standing slightly ajar, made from sustainable materials. The number 14B was etched into its surface, and when Eliza looked closer, she could see tiny pressed flowers embedded in the frame. It's called The Knock That Changed Everything, Christopher explained. I've been working on it in secret for months. It's beautiful, Eliza said, deeply touched. There's one more thing, Christopher added, his voice suddenly nervous. Look inside. Eliza peered through the partially open door of the sculpture and gasped. Inside, nestled in a tiny alcove, was a ring, a simple but elegant band of recycled gold with a small ethically sourced diamond. Christopher took her hand, his eyes full of love. Eliza Hart, you knocked on my door by accident, but it was the most fortunate mistake of my life. You changed everything for me, my work, my priorities, my heart. Will you marry me? Tears of joy streamed down Eliza's face as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Christopher." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the first guests began to arrive for the store opening. Victor was among them, now a firm ally and friend to them both. "Congratulations," he said, noticing the ring immediately. "Though I can't say I'm surprised." "Thank you, Victor," Eliza said sincerely, "for everything." The evening was a triumph. Critics praised the innovative concept of the store, combining high-end sustainable furniture with accessible art and stationery. Journalists clamored for the story of how Hart and Dane had met and formed their partnership, both professional and personal. As the last guests departed, Eliza and Christopher stood in their new space, arms around each other. "What are you thinking?" Christopher asked, seeing her thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about how different my life was just 6 months ago," Eliza replied. "How I was struggling to make ends meet, feeling lost, and then I knocked on the wrong door." "The right door," Christopher corrected gently. "Just with the wrong number," Eliza smiled up at him. "Who would have thought a mistake could lead to all this?" "Some mistakes are actually fate stepping in," Christopher said, kissing her softly. "And some knocks change everything." Hand in hand, they locked up their store and stepped out into the New York night, ready to begin the next chapter of their story together, a story that had started with a simple knock on a door marked 14B. 2 years later, Eliza sat in a comfortable chair in the nursery of their brownstone home, gently rocking their 3-month-old daughter, Kate. The room was furnished with pieces Christopher had designed himself, with walls decorated with framed examples of Eliza's paper art. On the wall opposite the crib hung a beautifully framed hotel keycard, the one Eliza had used when she mistakenly knocked on room 14B. Beside it was the note Christopher had slipped under her door that night. "If you ever knock by accident again, I'll always answer." Christopher appeared in the doorway, smiling at the sight of his wife and daughter. "She's finally asleep." "Just nodded off," Eliza whispered, carefully rising to place the baby in her crib. Together they stood watching their daughter sleep, arms around each other's waists. "I got the final numbers for the quarter today," Christopher said quietly. "The sustainable division has officially outperformed the luxury division for the first time." "Victor must be beside himself," Eliza chuckled. "Actually, he sent flowers." "To congratulate us," Christopher replied. "He's come a long way." They moved quietly from the nursery to the living room, where Max, Luna, and Charlie were sprawled on the furniture. The brownstone was the perfect blend of their lives, spacious enough for Christopher's design work, but with the character and warmth of Eliza's old apartment. Hart and Dane had expanded to 3 locations, with a full line of sustainable home goods joining the furniture and stationery. Eliza now led a team of artisans who created limited edition pieces, while still making special cards herself for important occasions. "Happy anniversary, by the way," Christopher said, pulling a small package from behind a cushion. 2 years. Since you said yes." "I thought we weren't doing gifts this year," Eliza protested, even as she reached for her own hidden gift for him. "Some traditions can't be broken," Christopher replied with a smile. They exchanged packages. Christopher's gift to Eliza was a delicate bracelet with a tiny door charm. Eliza's gift to him was a handmade book filled with pressed flowers and photographs, documenting their journey together. "I love you," Eliza said, leaning against his shoulder as they sat on the couch. "Every day I love our life together more." "All because you knocked on the wrong door," Christopher mused, his arm tightening around her. "Best mistake I ever made," Eliza agreed. Outside, the New York night wrapped around their brownstone, a gentle rain beginning to fall. Inside, surrounded by the life they had built together, Eliza and Christopher knew they had found what most people search for all their lives. A love that felt like coming home, a partnership of equals, a family created from the heart. And it had all begun with a simple knock on a door marked 14B, a knock that had truly changed everything. The end.